multinational corporations that bring a lot of jobs, but at the same time make a very hefty profit. We don't know how much that profit is because they won't tell. And unless you're you're the premier or in the cabinet, otherwise you don't know. Not even MLAs know that.
Yeah. Well, that even under the rules of the game that we have, there is no reason that I can think of for it to be impossible to find out how much you're getting for the resources that belong to the state. That is something that can be fixed, even under the rules of our game. You might get an argument that for any individual contract, for any individual tenure, there's contractual privacy, right? That it's a private contract between the Crown and a private company, and it would jeopardize profitability of that company if their competitors knew.
But it sounds oxymoronic to believe that it's a private contract between a public entity. Government is a public, and the public is not allowed to know what their government, their representatives are negotiated. That doesn't seem very democratic.
You don't have to try to convince me. I completely agree that this seems very odd. A couple of remarks on this point. There was a time in the colonies that became Canada where the cabinet was not required to answer to government. And it was a big triumph for democracy that made that link, that said that the cabinet had to answer to the majority in the House of Commons or in an elected assembly. And along with that came the power to control revenues from Crown land. And that was an enormous boon in the early days of these colonies. And for some of us, some of the provinces, it continued to be huge. So the issue of Crown land and revenues from it is a key question for democracy in the history of our country. The second point, I guess, though, is that we tend, because none of us want to pay taxes, right?
I don't know about that. But okay.
Well, if it wouldn't make any difference to the services, none of us would want to pay taxes.
But we do for services. We say we need healthcare, we need education.
Oh, yeah.
So it's our responsibility to
absolutely.
pay taxes.
So if you were to add that point, I would say absolutely it is a point of pride for me to pay taxes. The problem with Crown revenues is that the person who pays the piper plays the tune, gets to call the tune, right? The person who pays the piper gets to call the tune. And if you rely too much on revenues that don't come from the mass of the population, the government has less and less interest in what the mass of the population has to say. So if you don't want to pay taxes, remember that that is your one guarantee that the government has to listen to you.
To some people, I presume. In Ecuador, where I come from, the president said to a few oil corporations, you've been paying 15% of royalties and taking 85% of your profits. And I said, we're going to switch it. We want the 85% and you take the 15%.
Oh, yes.
Half of the oil corporations left the country and the other half stayed, and they're still making profit. But I wonder if in Canada we could ever do that.
Well, it's often been debated. Maybe not to the extent that Ecuador has discussed this, but periodically, and particularly when progressive governments come to power, the question has been asked, are we getting the right amount of money from these revenues? And I think it's entirely possible to have a very serious debate, even within the rules that we have today, about just how much corporations are getting to take from public lands.
Where is democracy when we don't know that trade deals that the Prime Minister and his finance advisors are making and closed door meetings somewhere in the States or Mexico or somewhere else.
Yes. I think this is a real dilemma. This undoubtedly is deeply shaped by diverse corporate pressures on governments on both sides of a trade agreement. So I'm aware of that. It is a different set of problems from the ones we've been talking about because it is a discussion between governments. And in many cases, we're negotiating with governments that also consider themselves to be democracies. So you're asking a very good question. At the same time, I think it's true that there are times in a negotiation where things are moving so quickly and things are delicate that it is appropriate to have some times for negotiation in private. In the same way, for instance, that unions and employers will have a time where there's media silence around collective agreement. But this is complicated, as I say, by the corporate interests that pressure the terms of trade agreements. And it's probably a matter for a much longer conversation, just how you balance that need for quiet negotiation and a robust public debate about what's acceptable and what isn't.
I can't think of one example why it should be private discussion of a free trade agreement between one country and another. Can you?
I think that there are certainly a lot more places in our public fora where we could be discussing the mandate that we give our negotiators in a much more open way. It's understandable that at a certain point in negotiations, again, take a collective agreement, the two sides lock themselves in a room and they come out with something that they take back to their respective constituents, right? But going into that, in a collective agreement, there's supposed to be appropriate consultation about what the negotiators are entitled to discuss. I don't think we've developed that in anything like the degree of openness that we'd want to have in a truly democratic society. One thing I'll say about the CETA negotiations was that there was a wrinkle added that I think could be pushed further. The wrinkle is that for the first time, provincial governments were invited to make contributions to the negotiating position. And that's hardly the emergence of a new democratic order. But I think the other thing I'd add is that nothing stops the rest of us from starting to debate in public settings what we do know about the agreement and just how appropriate or inappropriate those things are. I think, some things we're pretty sure are on the table. One of the reasons why the provinces have been brought on board is that they want government services to be open for private contractors to bid on. And that trade rules should apply to the provincial level of government services and not just the federal. That's something that deserves a whole lot of debate. And I think we can get started on that. And it does put pressure on government if you ask questions and point to the silences and say, well, does this mean that, I can expect to have a French-based water utility supplying water for us here in Victoria? And if they say, oh no, that's not on the table, then, oh, we've learned something interesting, haven't we?
I find, and some human rights activists find that it's exploitative, that we're taking advantage of poor people that are desperate for work, but we don't give them equal rights here because
Yes.
they're kind of second-class citizens.
Yes.
They can pay taxes, but as soon as their visa is finished, they have to depart. So it's a kind of exploitation. It's something like slavery.
Yeah. I mean, I because of the terrible scourge of slavery, I'm careful with that particular word because there are desperate, oppressive things that aren't slavery that we need to be just as worried about. So, but with that qualification, I would completely agree with you. There is certainly a place if labor is not mobile in a world where capital is very mobile. There's something troubling about that. On the other hand, the idea that labor is mobile, but only if they're willing to accept conditions that are below what the people of the country are willing to deal with. I mean, regardless of what your ethical tradition is, I mean, in my ethical tradition, there's a strong norm that's very deep-rooted that says you will treat the stranger like your own, right? And that's something that I think we have to take very seriously, even in our secular society.
But you think the government is listening to you when you say that you should treat your foreigners the same as you?
I certainly think that there are some pretty serious problems with the way the temporary workers system has been set up right now. And I think there's a constant pressure in the competitive marketplace to drive down costs. And we always have to remember, no matter how pleasant spokespeople say their relationship is with their employees, employees' wages are always in our system considered a cost.
The point here is the government really doing what the majority of Canadians want, or do they have their own agenda, which is completely disconnected, or to a degree disconnected from what the majority of people want? I presume that if we were to have a referendum, people would understand that and say, no, that's not right. If you want to bring Mexican or Indian workers, give them full citizenship, the same as we did when we came, right? But the government is not connected with what the will of the people is.
Right.
For 10 years or so, polls indicated that people didn't want Canada to be involved in Afghanistan. And yet the Prime Minister and his Minister of Defense decided that we go there. And I haven't seen a poll saying where the majority of Canadians stand in relation to Syria, but our ships are there. And I see a disconnection there between our government and the majority of people. So to me that's troublesome because I don't see democracy there. When we can talk all we want, but the government is going to do what they're going to do.
Yeah. I think you're raising some really important and troubling things. I think even within the rules of our parliamentary system, a lot could be done in Canada to enhance elected representatives' role in making these crucial decisions. In Britain, no matter what you want to say about the requirements, they had to recall Parliament, they had to bring these matters before Parliament. That's not happened here, and that's a starting point in the debate that I'd like to raise. I certainly think when we speak to our better selves, some of these things are really obvious. I think that part of being a genuine democracy, though, is that we as citizens have to cultivate our better natures, right? We've got to remember that we aren't just here to keep our taxes low. Our role as citizens isn't just for our family to get a little richer. It's to build a society where we can look each other in the eye as equals.
There are many reasons and excuses to dismiss the need for shifting from representative democracy to direct democracy. But when a significant number of us, the citizens, realize the need and the possibility of changing the political system, we will start legislating our own shadow constitution. How do we do that? One possibility is suggested on this little booklet, Perpetual Direct Democracy, published by Amazon.com, but you can also read it for free online on our website, pacific.ca.